Hello everyone. As you can see from the way I'm speaking and from the fact that there isn't really anything visual going on in the screen except for this little cozy looping bonfire animation, things are going to be a little different in this video. And to explain why that is, I want to give a little life update, if you will. I know that most people don't care, but the context is a little important, I feel, to, really explain what's going on right now. So, this is not really fresh news. I did say it in my latest video and the posts from around that time and a little before that. I got a job now. The previous videos, the videos that I have made before the Outer Wilds video, were all made when I was either a student or worked just a part-time job or straight up unemployed. Now that I have a full-time job, I don't really have so much time on my hands to make these videos. However, as you can probably easily tell, I don't really want to quit. I want to keep making videos because I enjoy it. That being said, I also need to be realistic from now on. And with that realistic perspective, it's not really too difficult to see that it's not going to be sustainable from now on to keep the same quality and consistent upload schedule for the videos while also working my day job. Now I'm self-aware enough to realize that most videos I have made so far aren't really, or any of them really, aren't very high quality. But believe it or not, I do actually put in quite a lot of effort for them. Usually the script writing, then the audio editing, and finally the video editing each took around like a week. And then there's the recording part that I haven't even mentioned, and all the final touches and little like 1 day breaks in between them that usually make up about a month of like cooking time for each video when I'm able to like just focus on the video, like when I was unemployed, for instance. And now that I'm not, I need to, put a little less load on myself for the videos. Now that being said, don't be scared, it's not always going to be like this. This video you're currently listening to is an outlier. There is still going to be scripted content regularly, and I'm still going to show actual footage. I'm just going to have a looser upload schedule, like once every 2 months maybe, and I'm not going to go that hard on the audio and video editing from now on. Like, it's not going to be Outer Wilds video levels of editing, because I went like much harder than I usually go for the first half of that video especially. What you can expect is, for instance, the Signalis video, that type of editing where I still show relevant footage from the game, but there's not that much, editing around it. The Endoparasitic video is also similar, and so is the BPM video. Really, when you think about it, the Outer Wilds video is probably the most high effort review that I have made, and I'm really proud of that video, but that's the type of video that I'm talking about when I say this won't be sustainable to, just keep that level of quality and keep the 1 video per month schedule. So yeah. Now that that's cleared up, let's talk about what this specific video is about. So first of all, if you somehow missed it from my 5-minute ramble just now and somehow didn't read the title before clicking on this video is audio only. There isn't anything visual going on, and there won't be anything visual going on. So you can just safely put this in the background while you're doing something else. Just, use it as background noise, whatever. As for what that noise is going to be about, well, backlogs. Gaming backlogs specifically. Because chances are, if you're watching a channel like this, you probably have one of those. And so do I, of course. That has been just the absolute bane of my existence until I decided to man up and take it on head first. Towards like the end of June 2022, according to what Steam tells me when I look at my stats for the first game I played on this journey. So it's been around like 20 months, a little more than 1.5 years, until I said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to just play game after game of my backlog. I'm going to finish each one, and then without replaying it, I'm going to move on to the next one until I get through all of these games that have accumulated throughout the years, so that I can just silence that noise that's constantly on the back of my head telling me, when are you going to play these, Sarp? You know, these are just collecting dust in your library and they're going to stack on top of each other forever until you decide to touch them. So yeah, once that voice is silenced, I'm hoping that I will relatively be in a little peace and free to replay shit as I please, and, you know, check out new things that interest me at my own pace without any pressure of, you know, just dozens and dozens of games after that are staring at me in their dusty little corners. So yeah, this is the very late first checkpoint of my journey, of my challenge to silence that voice and essentially just beat the backlog, as at least the essential games in the backlog, because, you know, there will always be games that you say, oh, I want to check this out at some point, that would be fun. But then there are also games that, you know, you put there and they're like, I have to play this shit, I cannot die before I play this shit. This is fucking mandatory. This is not an optional game. You know, those are the two categories of games in most people's backlogs, and essentially what I'm trying to do with this journey is get those games that I see as essential out of the way, so that I can move on to the optional stuff at my own pace and whatever else I want. Now, before I move on to the games that we're going to be talking about, it is also worth mentioning lastly that I was heavily inspired by the channel called Civet and the channel called Daryl Talks Games. You might know these two guys if you watch a channel like mine. If not, both of their channels and the videos that I'm going to be mentioning now will be in the description. So Civet has this series called Civet's Backlog Monologue, where he sort of does this similar thing for his own backlog. They're like these little checkpoints where he talks about the games that he's played and will be playing. And Daryl Talks Games has these two videos called A Misguided Guide to Finishing Your Gaming Backlog, and then a year after that, How I Beat My Gaming Backlog 1 year later. These two videos, they will also both be linked in the description, but I really do recommend those videos over even this one, really, if you think that all this backlog talk is relatable to you, that you also feel that those stacks of games are fucking haunting your nightmares and you're constantly thinking, how am I going to play all of this? If all that is relatable to you, even more than this video that is my very own sweet little child, I recommend Daryl's videos. Those two videos are really good. With all of that being said, the way that I have done this is I took little notes, little bullet points for each of these games throughout like the last 2 weeks or so, during like downtime at work. Don't tell my boss that I was slacking, I guess. For each of these, how many was there? Let me just flip the pages of my notebook. Yes, I did take these notes on an actual notebook, like I used pen and paper. I know, shocking. So I have 50 games on this list that I have played since the start of this journey in June 2022. And I'm going to use these little bullet points, little notes that I have taken for each of these 50 games to briefly talk about them back to back throughout the rest of this video. And then finally, I'm going to go over the rest of my essential games to play that is still in the backlog. And that will do it. I mean, we shouldn't need anything else. This will probably take like, I don't know, 2 hours or something to get through. So without further ado, let's start before we eat even more time with this bloated intro. Number 1, Haven. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the developers of this game, the game makers, they made Fury, which is a game that I fucking adore. So this was definitely going to be the first game on my list that I was going to play. Now, initially I didn't really like it. I still don't really love it, but I appreciate it more than when I initially played it. And to explain that, I want to get into a little of the design philosophy behind Fury according to the developers here. I'm going to link this document in the description as well. But what's most important to get away from that document is that they use a term called a triple-I game to describe Fury. Now, you might have heard the term triple-I before as an exact opposite to a AAA game in terms of like budget or team size. You might have heard games that are basically made on $10 by one guy be described as triple-I, but the triple-I term used in this document specifically is very different from that. Here it is depicted as an opposite of the AAA game design philosophy rather than the AAA budget. Basically what the document gets at with this is that AAA games, because of their large budget and team size, can achieve so many different impressive feats at once. A triple-I game, on the other hand, is the exact opposite, where it just focuses on perfecting that one aspect, which naturally leads to it getting a kind of niche but passionate audience, because with just that one thing, most people will not really care about the game that much, and some people on the other hand will fucking love it to death. For instance, the document compares God of War 2018 to Fury, and one area of comparison is the music, for instance. Whereas God of War has these grandiose orchestral tracks, Fury has this edgy, dark synth electronic music, and there, for instance, the former is a much safer bet to go for mass appeal, because while not everyone may feel something special listening to the God of War 2018 soundtrack, I reckon that not a lot of people would hate it either. And in the meantime, I can definitely see the Fury soundtrack not being for everybody. But for the people that it is for, I bet that it will be something special. And that's essentially what the document is getting at. To actually directly quote a few sentences here from the document, we can choose not to please everybody. We can choose to make something that most would actually dislike, in order to make sure a niche of gamers will find it truly memorable. I have seen many opinions on this game, and most of them were either, nah, I don't like it, it's not for me, or nah, I like it, but it's not really all that fucking special to me. To me though, personally, I fucking love this game. And I definitely think that this design philosophy was the reason for that. And that's why I respect and appreciate it so much too. But I think it was like this over appreciation of just this one philosophy, which is definitely a way to make a game, but not the objectively correct way or anything like that. It led to me really hating on Haven much more than it deserved. Because I think that this game is going for the exact opposite of a triple-I game according to the game makers, which I took that as a betrayal to their own design. Now, before I get to why that was fucking wrong of me to do, I want to clarify why I felt that way playing this game. So this game has a lot of different gameplay elements mashed together. It has an open world that consists of many different small islands that you can explore, but most of these islands are very similar to each other and don't have much to explore on them really. Then there's the combat, which cannot really decide if it wants to be turn-based or real-time. Then there's the flow trails or flux trails, was it? It was something like that, where you can ride along these energy trails to charge up your boots that let you boost while moving and stuff. And you can also follow these energy trails to clear gaps and reach places that you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. But all you have to do is just follow the line. Like anytime there is somewhere that you cannot reach, all you have to do is find where the flow trail that you need to follow is and just follow the line. It's so simple and just never really challenging or interesting. And finally, you very regularly have these visual novel-like sections full of dialogue, and that's where most of the story happens. And I would actually call those sections pretty good. I liked the main characters and their dynamic. I enjoyed the story actually, and also the soundtrack of the game was pretty good. So the game has a lot of good elements as well that I like. It's just that it tries to do too many things and succeeds at few of them. Just as the document I was just talking about suggests would happen when an indie game tries to be like a AAA game with all these different elements and systems. But even so, while it may be enough justification for you and me and anyone else to criticize the game for doing this, it was really not enough justification for me to hate it so much when I initially played it, because now that some time has passed and I can look at the game with a calmer mindset, I can really see how much passion and effort went into this game. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters more than anything, that these guys tried to do something different again, even if it was not tried in the exact same way they tried it before. It's fine, you know, like I said, there isn't an objectively correct way to make a game, and sometimes you may have your problems with how a game approaches its design, but you also need to see how much they care for that, you know, because this game is made by people that care. It's not a soulless cash grab of a game or a middling attempt to capitalize off current trends or anything like that. You can clearly see the developers made it because they wanted to make it, and that's something really special, I think. Even if you don't really enjoy the game, you can still appreciate it knowing that. Number 2, Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Looking at it objectively, this is not a flawless game and definitely not for everyone. The movement is stiff, the combat is simple, the exploration is pretty good but nothing revolutionary, and the story is honestly as standard as it gets. Even the twists in said story are pretty predictable, I find. As far as I know, and I'm saying that because I haven't played any of the Castlevania games before, this game is really trying to emulate the style of Symphony of the Night. And it's doing that by being as faithful as possible. Like, this is not a modern recreation of Symphony of the Night as far as I can tell based on what people are saying. Like, this game is going for such an old school feel to appease to those fans that it feels like a classic title rather than a modern one. And I'm not saying that as like this is a masterpiece, it's a classic. No, I mean that like this game feels like it's from the fucking 90s. Like, you don't have the type of dashing and super jumping and these creative systems like the health system in Hollow Knight, where you can spend your soul energy or whatever it's called to either like attack or heal, and that decision making is in every part of the combat. Like, there isn't anything like that, you know. You heal with fucking health potions that you open your inventory and select to use. Like, it is not going to be a game for everyone, but for me, it clicked so much with me, you know, because just like with Haven, while you're playing this game, you can just see how much passion and care the developers put in while making this. Like, just like with Haven, they made this game because they wanted to make it. You can clearly see that they had so much fun making it. The goofy enemy designs and voices are an absolute blast. The OST slaps harder than my dad with the belt. The simply written but incredibly charming cast, especially Zangetsu, my beloved, voiced by David Hayter. They got fucking David Hayter for this game. Holy shit, man. And like, I don't know, it just all comes together so well. Like, it's really one of those games that is more than the sum of its parts, but I can't really exactly put into words why that is. It just works. I don't know, it works for me. It definitely won't work for everyone, but it works for me. Number 3, OneShot. So this is one of those games that the internet fucking adores. Like, it's almost like just a tier below Undertale in that regard, you know? Like, with its influence on the people that play it and won't shut up about it, and like they change their PFPs to the character from OneShot and stay as that for their entire internet life. You know, like, it's really one of those formative experiences for a lot of people, it seems like, when I look at how this game is talked about. And I really wanted it to be that special of a game for me as well. And I really liked it at the start. In fact, for most of my time with it, I really liked it. I think it has a really cute world. It has very charming characters. I especially liked the main character a lot, Nico. They were, and I'm saying they because I don't think they have a confirmed gender. I think that's ambiguous. But yeah, I think they were really cute and really likable as a protagonist. And the game also has just an incredible vibe, honestly. It's probably also helped that I was playing this in the middle of the night while everyone else at the house was sleeping after a really busy day of entertaining my younger cousin that was visiting. And those few hours at the dead of night was like my only time to recharge. I don't know, it's made the game quite memorable, but not because I really like adored the game itself. And the main thing that kept me away from adoring it, and I know this is a divisive aspect of the game, like the people that love it absolutely fucking love the shit out of it because of this aspect. Sometimes, like, it's not a deal breaker for them, in fact it's a plus, it's a cool thing. But I really don't like it when the game starts fucking talking to me directly and addressing me by my dumb fucking Windows username, and like it's doing this meta shit where like, oh, you are in control of Nico's world, Sarp. If you close the game, she dies. Oh no. And I really don't care for it, especially when the game is like, hey, I hid the key to this puzzle in between your computer files. Go search for it in this folder. Haha. Like, fuck off, okay? I want to get immersed in your world. I want to feel like I'm in there. Don't fucking say to me out of nowhere all of a sudden, hey, you in the real world and not in this virtual world. Hey, your real actions in the real world will influence this virtual world. Like, fuck that. I don't want that. I fucking hate that shit. Like, the one instance I can think of where that was done actually decently and I enjoyed it was in Inscription, where it used my files and my Steam friends and all that type of shit, but according to the narrative, those were actually all Luke Carter's files and stuff. And the game also did all of that with its like own UI instead of making me tab out and search through the file explorer on my own computer. You know, that was cool. I kind of appreciated that. And that's like the only instance of this that I can think that didn't annoy me. So yeah, that was really the deal breaker for me with this game. But otherwise, I enjoyed it. I think it was a really fun time. And you know, if these aspects that I hate feel interesting to you, then I definitely recommend this one. You might really find something special here. Number 4, Ori and the Blind Forest. This game is loved by many people, and I've also seen it criticized by many people as well. Most commonly for its floaty and kind of imprecise movement and its lacking combat. And the latter I will talk about, but the former, the floaty, like kind of a bit inconsistent movement, I actually kind of like that. I think it works with the way the game is designed. You know, it doesn't really have these very defined straight edges in its like platforming and stuff. It's more Sonic than Mario, I would say. You don't make these like small yet very precise jumps and dashes and stuff, but you rather like keep throwing yourself off of things and at things, gathering momentum, going faster and faster. It has a very satisfying flow. I don't know, I don't really dislike it. I had a lot of fun with the platforming, but that being said, the game is still a bit too focused on platforming platforming for me. The combat not only is indeed lackluster, but it's also not challenging at all, and the enemies are more usually used as parts of the platforming, like you use them as things to bounce off of rather than things to kill, you know what I'm saying? Or use their projectiles and stuff that they're throwing at you for similar purposes. I don't know, I just wish it was a more balanced Metroidvania. That's more kind of my jam, like an equal focus on combat and platforming, and if not, I prefer more focus on combat usually. I'm not a huge platforming person, honestly, so this is mostly a me thing, but I won't lie that like the combat system is objectively fucking lackluster in this game. Like you might as well not put anything in there if you're going to make it like this simple. You just press a button and it auto aims all the enemies around you. It's just, I don't know, it's ridiculous. But even so, even though the fact that the game being so focused on platforming would not make it my cup of tea in another situation, I still really fucking enjoyed this game because everything else about it that's here is so goddamn good. Like it has incredible visuals, incredible art direction, an amazing soundtrack, just top of the notch production quality in all areas, polished and smooth, and a couple of the levels especially has such fucking good level design, like they're so fun to play. The Ginso tree, for instance, where you make your first big escape, like that's a big pop-off moment in the game. That was like, my heart was fucking beating out of my chest during that section. What an incredible section. And then the second temple, the icy one with the rotating blocks that like change how your character is affected by gravity. That level was fucking amazing as well. That was, I think, my favorite level in the game. Number 5. Ori and the Will of the Wisps. So I liked the first game, and this one I absolutely loved. It's all the positives of the first game and even more on top of it. I loved it so much. Even better mechanics, more consistently great level design, like the first game just had 3 standout levels, and in this game I enjoyed my time in all the levels basically. There's even more side content to do, like there is this hub area that you build by finding stuff around the world, completing challenges and everything. There's even boss battles now. Those are now a thing, and they're usually actually great fights that test what you learned in terms of like both platforming and combat. The whole game, in fact, I think meshes these two elements way better than the first one, I'd say, and that's mainly because of the massive overhaul to the combat system that makes its mechanics just as involved and plentiful as the platforming mechanics. So instead of just the one fucking hold down the button and everything around you dies attack from the first game, you actually have multiple different ranged attacks and melee attacks. It's a really like massive and overall just an amazing upgrade to the combat system, honestly. However, the two issues I have with this game is that even though the combat mechanics are expanded, in terms of challenge, the combat is still so much of a cakewalk compared to the platforming. Like in terms of difficulty, there's still nothing there, and all of it is just on the platforming side. All the challenges still there. And the villain, it's just weaker in terms of like design and story than the first game's villain, I'd say. I think that the game is just going for way too much with them. Like the design is just too much, and the story is like kind of like the first game's. It's a tragic villain, I guess, again, if you could call them tragic. I don't know, I didn't feel that it was as tragic as the first game's villain story, you know, but whatever. It's just trying to replicate the first villain's energy again, and put more to it, but it ends up being less, I feel. Like it's one of those instances really where less was just more. So yeah, overall, besides those two little gripes, amazing fucking game. Borderline masterpiece, heavily recommended. Number 6, Celeste. So this is also one of those games that the internet adores even more than OneShot, I'd say. Like, this is the type of game that comes up when you're having the what are the greatest indie games of all time conversations, you know. It is regarded at like the same tier as Outer Wilds and Hollow Knight and stuff like that. And it's not even just confined to the internet, really. Like, this game was among the nominees for the Game of the Year at the 2017 Independent Game Awards, which is so rare for a game so indie as this to make it up there with all those like big budget titles, you know. And just like with OneShot, again, I swear I'm not doing this deliberately to like piss people off out there, but it didn't really end up evoking the same type of adoration in me as most people have for the game. I think it's a very good game. I enjoyed my time with it, and there's nothing like inherently wrong with it. There's nothing that I would call an objective flaw, but it's naturally just not my cup of tea. As I've said, I'm not a big platforming person, and this doesn't even have that like floaty momentum based type of platforming that I relatively prefer. At least this has precision platforming, which, you know, combined with the difficulty of the game is just not something that I enjoy too much. You know, I like challenging games, but I much prefer for it to be like difficult puzzles or difficult combat as opposed to like difficult platforming. You know, I don't know, I get more annoyed than excited over the idea of getting from point A to point B being such a hassle, you know. That's not to say I don't enjoy different or interesting movement and traversal mechanics in games. I just prefer that if they're going to be the main challenge of the game, I'd rather have them, you know, integrated into a fight of some sort or some interesting sequence like that instead of just, you know, get from this point to this point. That's why I think my absolute favorite section of this game was the boss fight in the 6th level against Battlein. I really ended up enjoying that compared to most other sections of the game. So yeah, that sort of idea is what interests me more than what the game usually goes for. Other than that, there's also the way the story and the message of the game is told. It's mostly text, not much subtext, you know, and that's not, again, an inherently bad thing or a flaw. It's just like, you know, I prefer either a little more story or a little more effort required to dig, to, you know, understand things. As it is, most aspects of this game, from the story to the soundtrack and atmosphere, everything, it was all pretty alright, but none of it really gave me masterpiece vibes. You know, like the characters were written well and were charming, for instance, but I've seen a million better or more interesting ones in other media before, so didn't really felt too impressive to me. The soundtrack is the same thing. A lot of people love this game's soundtrack, but even of the same artist, Ben Prunty, I think his Subnautica Below Zero soundtrack is far superior to this, for instance. Despite all of that, I think I get why this game clicks so much with so many people and like ends up being their favorite game or something like that. It's really like trying to be more than the sum of its parts with the whole journey through the mountain, and I think that experience in its entirety was what some people who played this game really needed in their lives at that point, and the whole experience ended up being really relatable to them, like the whole experience that Madeline goes through, I mean. So if you think this is one of the greats out there, this is one of your favorite games, your opinion is quite valid, and I respect that and I understand why that is. It's just that due to my own preferences and life experiences, it didn't ended up being that for me. Number 7. Cruelty Squad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this game is too much for me. I really respect and appreciate what it is going for. I do get what the game is trying to achieve. I do get what it's trying to tell, I swear to God. It's not about, you know, me not being able to find anything deeper than a fucking like drug trip shitpost game here. I know it is more than that. It's just I'm too weak for it, okay? Like this game's soundtrack, for instance, Slurpcore, like people will swear by that shit, like telling it's the greatest soundtrack of all time. It was fucking headache inducing for me, and I ended up muting the game's soundtrack after the first level and played it without the soundtrack on for the rest of the game. I know that is heresy to some people out there, but I'm not strong enough for this shit, man. I'm too much of a normie for this, you know. The visuals are another thing, and how the game is played is a whole other thing. This game is just exhausting to play. Like, I had to take regular breaks, like every 2 missions. I had to take like an hour break before moving on to the next one. I'm not epileptic or anything like that, but I felt like the closest I ever been to a seizure in my life was when I was playing this game. Again, I really appreciate it, but it's just too much. So even though I was really curious about what else the game had to say after I beat its very basic bitch ending, like I got the, you know, the standard ending, you beat the flower boss and then you walk away. I wanted to continue after that, but I just felt like I physically couldn't, or I was going to vomit. So yeah, very interesting game. I really appreciate it. I really respect it. Maybe like think twice before buying it. Maybe think twice before, you know, figuring out if it's really going to be for you, because it will slap you with absolute insanity from the very first level without any warning. Like, so I'm going to give you the warning right now before you try it out. Number 8, Bioshock. So here we are with another really beloved, really influential game, commonly referred to as a masterpiece, and also commonly criticized by people that return to it years after, just like its sequels, especially Infinite. And we'll get to Infinite, but before that, how is the first game? Well, I would say that everything is great and holds up to and including the scene with Andrew Ryan. You know what scene I'm talking about. I'm not going to elaborate anymore as to not give huge spoilers. And, you know, up to that point, the atmosphere is great, the pacing is very solid, the game is fun to play. There are some especially standout sections like the one with Sander Cohen, for instance. The Big Daddy fights are thrilling, with them being in a wandering, non-aggressive neutral state until you initiate the fight, so you can prepare for it however you like. And no matter how much you prepared, once you initiate the fight, it's still a tough ordeal in which you have to like utilize everything in your arsenal. And at the end you are also rewarded very handsomely for making it through. It's a really like solid game up to that scene, and then I don't know, I think it just kind of falls off once the new villain makes his appearance, and would have been much better if we didn't get any like shitty boss fight at the end of the game, and instead that scene I was talking about or something similar to that was moved to the end of the game and we dealt with this new guy before Ryan, you know. I think that would have been a much better structure. But yeah, besides that, there's also the hacking minigame, I guess, that everyone has beef with, and I don't really hate it that much, but it is used very excessively. Maybe like the game could have done with less things to hack if the hacking minigame was going to take that much time each time, you know. So yeah, those are my few gripes with the game. Other than that, really solid experience. I think it mostly holds up pretty well, but definitely has some rough edges here and there. Number 9, Bioshock 2. I personally don't think this game beats out the first 2/3 of Bioshock 1. That part that I said was pretty solid until like that scene, after which it falls off. But overall, it has a more consistent quality, like being able to use your weapons and plasmids at the same time, and the overhaul to the hacking minigame, which was a much needed change if you're going to still have as much things to hack in your game. But the gameplay loop with the little sisters specifically feels a little too repetitive if you're not harvesting them, like going from body to body and defending her against waves of enemies in like each level like twice, 3 times. It just kind of ended up being tedious after a while. At first it was cool, but then I ended up loading those sections and wishing that they were over already so that I can, you know, progress through the game. The Big Sister was a really great addition though. I really enjoyed those fights. They're like an even more bonkers version of the Big Daddy fights, which I already love, and they're still here too. So overall, just a much more fun game game to play besides those little sister defending sections, which still would have been cool if there weren't just so many of them throughout the whole game. The story is also pretty good. It feels more personal, and Sophia is an interesting contrast to Ryan. It feels rare to see a series challenging like both extremes of the political spectrum, so that was a very welcome surprise. I really enjoyed that. And besides just Sophia, there are some interesting NPCs, and also the way the endings are implemented based on what you do with those NPCs is really interesting too. Like the first game's endings was just based on what you do with the little sisters, and this game's endings are both dependent on what you do with the little sisters and what you do with the NPCs, because the NPCs are these shitty people. You're just supposed to spare all the little sisters to get the good ending, because they're the ones that are like innocent victims in the situation, but the NPCs are not. So I ended up like sparing 2 of those NPCs and killing one of them, and I still got the good ending, which was pretty interesting, and it honestly felt appropriate despite the fact that my hands weren't completely clean, because I killed that one NPC since I felt like it was the right thing to do, since I felt like if I didn't do that it was just going to cause more suffering down the line for both them and the people that would get involved with them. And one more story section that stood out to me was the little sister section, where you see the world from the perspective of a little sister from the first time, and it's just completely different, and it allows you to speculate and understand so much about their nature and their role in the story. It's an amazing and overall just a very underrated section in the series, I feel. One thing though that is still fairly well utilized in the story but doesn't really come into play that much during the gameplay, I feel, is the fact that you are playing as a big daddy in this game. And originally I also believe that was like a huge selling point for this sequel, or you get to be playing as a big daddy this time around. But you don't really feel that. The only way the game feels different from the first in terms of like movement combat, in terms of anyway, is that you can have a rivet gun now like the Big Daddy Rosie's did in the first game, and you have a drill. Everything else, from your health to the damage you deal to the way you move, feels like you are not playing with a Big Daddy suit. Like nothing feels different. It's really difficult to find out a fix for this, but it's just that when I picture a Big Daddy, I picture this, you know, slow, hulking, tough beast instead of this like nimble, fragile player character that we're playing as, you know. It just doesn't give off the feel of playing as a Big Daddy inside the gameplay. You just have the Big Daddy grunts and the Big Daddy drill, and that's pretty much it. So even though I can't think of an exact solution to this problem, I think something could be done to give off that feel a bit better. Number 10, Bioshock Infinite. So this one we're going to do a little differently, because while I was taking notes for all these games, when I arrived at this one, I just stopped taking little bullet points and just wrote a whole small script for everything that I wanted to say about this game, because I fucking hate this game so much and I want to shit on it so much. That's like something took hold of me, some force fucking possessed me and forced my hand to furiously write everything that I wanted to say about this game word for word for like full 3 pages of my notebook here. So I'm just going to straight up read that, because I don't even give a shit about how much time I'm going to spend on this. All the other games on this list, I'm trying to like confine myself to a few minutes. Here I don't give a shit. I want to completely shit on this game for as much time as I need to do that. So here we go. I'm not that obsessed with political correctness and can look over or tolerate some cultural insensitivities, but holy shit, I'm not even black or that educated about black culture and history in this part of the world, but even I felt seriously offended by this shit. Like, I understand that the internet was edgier and less sensitive about these topics, but how the fuck did we give this a pass success even back then. I have no idea how everyone just kept insisting this was one of the best games of its generation, while it actively and seriously presents a both sides argument to the fucking civil rights movement. And this is after it spends multiple hours shitting at the racism and slavery practices before this movement took effect in the world. Like, what are you doing, game? Are you fucking crazy? Are you out of your goddamn mind? What do you mean Comstock and Fitzroy are the same? Oh my god. Like, I'm so glad we began collectively shitting on this game, because the best part is, even without this horrible shit, it would still be the worst Bioshock easily. The game starts out as a standard Bioshock game, but this time with a flavor of religious dogma to its antagonist rather than a political one. Then, instead of exploring that, the plot clumsily fumbles its way to a messy multiverse story that is not even as half as engaging. The characters make it even worse. I don't get why everyone loves Booker and Elizabeth so much, but I enjoyed them neither as individual characters nor as a bantering duo. Booker has the personality of stale bread, and Elizabeth is given too much focus to the point that she sidelines everyone and everything, at least to some degree, from the moment she's introduced till the end of the game. And she is just not nearly interesting or compelling enough of a character for that. She is kind of there, her character and backstory has some things going on, but they either needed to do even more with her character if she was going to be this central and crucial to the plot, or they should have put less focus on her. Which is definitely not what the fucking DLC for this game does. So this is the point where I'm going to go off script again, because this part I didn't write fully, but the way that the DLC utilizes Elizabeth and makes her the catalyst of everything, even going so far as to retcon certain stuff from the first game to make it so that Elizabeth was the cause for them. Like, it kind of reminds me, I know this is a pull out of nowhere, but Attack on Titan Season 4. Attack on Titan Season 4 was a season of the series that I constantly went back and forth, not being able to decide if I like it or not. And overall, I think at the end, I like some of the things in it and I hate some of the things in it. And the thing that I hate the most, the thing that I feel hurts the series the most from the end of season 3 and onwards, is that it's all fucking Eren now. Everything has to connect to him. Everything is either his doing or done because of him. It feels like he's the only character in that world left with any sort of agency. None of the other characters' choices and actions and what they believe in fucking matters. It all always comes down to fucking Eren. That's not only like the biggest issue with that season, I feel, but it is also the catalyst for many other issues of the season. And that's how I feel about how Burial at Sea, the DLC for Bioshock Infinite, uses Elizabeth. It does the same thing with Elizabeth that Attack on Titan Season 4 does with Eren. Like, what is the point of any other fucking character in this universe anymore? Anyway, let's now return to the script. And finally, we have gameplay, which is a mixed bag. Elizabeth's contributions are cool, but the weapon wheel is removed for no reason, replaced by just 2 weapons at a time with much more ammo. And I really cannot think of any possible reason to feel that such a change was needed. Like, put aside the argument of whether it's a good or bad change for a moment, I'm not even mad, I'm just confused. I guess it's because every other popular shooter was doing it at the time, so they just decided to follow their lead without even thinking for a moment whether it would work with their own design. I don't know. In conclusion, just play the first 2 games if you're interested in the series. They're flawed but worthwhile games. Infinite, on the other hand, is messy and problematic with a DLC that just increases its problems while trying to fix them. Number 11. Shadow Warrior 2013. So, I know that I said this challenge was for me to get the essential games out of my backlog, but every once in a while I would also see a game that was on a ridiculous sale on Steam and I would check its how long to beat page if the screenshots looked interesting enough, and if it seemed like a game I could beat in 1 or 2 days, I would quickly pick it up and play it too. This is one such game, and I'm pretty glad that I got to play it because it scratched a very specific itch. See, this game feels like an early prototype of Doom 2016. It's kind of like budget Doom with a much less serious tone besides the ending. The ending is surprisingly poignant and mature compared to the rest of the game actually, which was kind of a nice surprise. The The boss fights range from awful to kind of decent, and the rest of pretty much anything about the game is just a solid 7 out of 10 across the board, honestly. Characters, voice acting, visuals, soundtrack, level design, enemies, weapons, upgrade systems, all of it is just fine, and thus so is the overall game. It's pretty fun, but don't expect anything special. If you're itching for anything remotely similar to Doom 2016, it might give you a scratch. Otherwise, you're not really missing out on anything fantastic. Oh, and before we move on, I should also mention that I also tried out Shadow Warrior 2 for a couple hours before it crashed and erased my progress, so I quit it forever cause I'm a salty, spiteful fuck like that. But that's okay since that game didn't really seem as fun as the first one anyway. I'll take budget Doom over budget Borderlands any day. Thank you. Number 12. Deep Rock Galactic. So I took just one bullet point for this game, and that bullet point is Rock and Stone. Cause what else you need to say about this game? But to be serious, I mean, I guess let's us start with the fact that people call this the good live service game, you know? And I always second that. Like everything about this game, from the base mechanics and character classes to the co-op and the mission design, is fucking excellent, and it unlocks so many possibilities for both goofy and tense moments. It is really fun to play with friends and with strangers as well, because it has an amazing community. I especially appreciate how the maps are like almost fully terraformable and expand just as much vertically as they expand horizontally, combined with the abilities your characters have to explore this huge space. It just ends up making the missions so much fun to play, man. And each of these missions are fun in their own ways, and add to all of this the fact that the game still keeps getting updated constantly. Like, I am praising it this much and I haven't even played the last season. In conclusion, Rock and Stone. Number 13. BPM Bullets Per Minute. So every once in a while, obviously, we're going to have games that I have already made videos on, and whenever we arrive at one of them, I'm just going to tell you to go ahead and watch the video, cause like, what the fuck can I still say about this game? I made a 45-minute video on it, man. Go watch it if you want to hear my opinions. This video is already going to be so long, so I'm not going to spend any extra time on these games that I have made videos on. Go watch the BPM video. Moving on to the next game. Number 14. Dishonored. So this is one of the poster boys for immersive sims, and it definitely deserves to be so, I think. Everything here is pretty fantastic. The gameplay, the level design, all the different routes you can take to your objective. Like, it serves the principles of an immersive sim very well in all aspects, and the side content is also pretty interesting. I also really love the world building. I really enjoy this 19th century steampunk meets magic type of aesthetic. I really like Dunwall is what I'm trying to say. But the story itself, the plot itself, is not really that impressive, I find. It's really the details, the lore, that sort of stuff that is more interesting than, you know, the main narrative itself. I really like that artificial heart, for instance, that has something to say whenever you look at someone and use it. It's really interesting, the kind of lines you get from it like that. I also like the fact that the conditions for getting the endings are not too strict. Like, you don't have to be completely non-lethal to get the low chaos ending, I believe. You can be like below a 20% kill count or something like that and still get a low chaos ending, as far as I know. However you wish to deal with your targets is also separate from that, I believe. So like, you can kill all of them, but for instance spare every single common enemy, and you can still get a low chaos ending, for instance, as well, I believe. So yeah, it's kind of like Bioshock 2, and I really appreciate it here just as I did there. But all that being said, gameplay wise, it's really skewed towards one route than the other, I feel, and that is my biggest gripe with this game. Your lethal kit has so many options, while your non-lethal kit has like just two. You can approach guys from behind and knock them unconscious, or you can shoot sleep darts, and basically everything else in your arsenal is is lethal. So because I was playing this game for the first time, I didn't even think before deciding to go high chaos against like regular enemies, so that I could have as much fun as I could possibly have using everything in my arsenal. But then when it came to my actual targets, I dealt with them non-lethally because that route was more interesting than just killing them. So to maximize the fun I had with the game, I spared the actual targets and killed everyone else, which ended up making for a really interesting playthrough. But yeah, I would have rather your lethal and non-lethal kits were more balanced. The DLC somewhat remedies this by introducing stun mines, but it's just still one extra way to deal with enemies non-lethally versus the tons of options you still have to go lethal. So it's not really that effective of an option overall. Number 15, Dishonored 2. So I loved this game more than the first overall, and the biggest reason is that my biggest issue with the first game is completely fixed here. The imbalance between your non-lethal and lethal kit. You have so many more options for non-lethal takedowns now. You have a non-lethal air takedown, you can parry enemies during melee combat and then put them into a chokehold. It is now just as fun to play non-lethally as it is to play lethally, and that is a huge plus with this game over the first one. The levels themselves are also even better than the first game, which already had some peak level design. The Clockwork Mansion and the time travel level in this game are especially fucking incredible. It is so fun to make your way through these levels and solve puzzles in them. I also love the Clockwork Soldiers. I much prefer them over the Tall Boys of the first game, which were basically impossible to deal with if you were playing non-lethal. You just had to dodge them, you couldn't do anything against them. But with the Clockwork Soldiers, not only can you destroy them without them counting as kills, but it is also incredibly fun to fight against them. Especially if you're in melee combat and you parry their blades and stuff. It is so good. The only downgrade from the first game I see is the plot. Since the villain is someone that should have been dealt with in the first game's DLC, but she just kind of appears here without explanation and kicks off the events of the game very suddenly, very abruptly in the opening cutscene, and the game just says go, and then the rest of the plot is also just not as interesting. Not that the first game's plot was that great, like I said, I think that was like much weaker in the first game compared to the overall world building and lore. Here it's just less interesting. I don't know, it's not too much of a deal breaker, like I said, because everything else is so goddamn good. Basically everything besides that I think is an improvement over the first game. I know a lot of people prefer the first game, but I don't know what they're on about. Again, it just has a marginally better plot and everything else just feels kind of lackluster compared to this one. So yeah, I recommend that you play both games and make your own decision. Number 16, Bayonetta. Everything about this game would be perfect and it would be an unrivaled masterpiece if they simply didn't put some of the things here. Like, it makes me so mad. I've never seen a game that is so close to being a masterpiece. All they had to do was keep themselves from adding this shit. This game has literally nothing missing. It has unnecessary, unfun shit put in between all the perfect bits. You will have an incredibly fun boss fight, but there will be a mandatory 20-minute Space Harrier minigame before that just does nothing for the game and is so infinitely more unfun to play than anything else in the game. You just have to remove these sections from the game and it is perfect. Like these terrible Space Harrier minigames, turret sections, there is this awkward shooting minigame after you beat a level in which you farm for points. Like, this shit is fucking stupid. You already had a perfect action game. Why are you adding this shit to it? Like, it just makes me think, was this game the opposite of rushed? Like, did they have too much time? Did they already reach peak and they still still had some months to develop more shit, and they just said, well, I guess we can put in minigames. Like, what happened here? I actually know the answer to that question. I know Kamiya is obsessed with Space Harrier minigames and shit for some reason. There was one at the end of DMC1 too, but here it's just excessive and it takes away from the game so much. Besides that, the one other gripe I have with the game is that there are way too many mashing QTEs. Like with every torture attack you have to button mash. With every boss you have so many button mashing QTEs. There needs to be like less button mashing QTEs, and some QTEs could have a better time window, I guess. But that's not really as big of an issue as all the other shit that I've listed. I don't know, it just makes me so mad that this game suffers from this. It's just so simple. It was so simple to just not add these things and have the perfect game. You were so close to greatness. I am just so disappointed. Number 17, Before Your Eyes. So I'm going to recommend another video here that does this game much more justice than I can do here and kind of goes over the same things that I'm going to describe, called The Game That Won't Let You See All of It by Jacob Geller. As with everything else, the video will be linked in the description. But to summarize in my own words what makes this game so special, I just find it to be really ballsy and commendable whenever developers put huge chunks of their games in places that won't be discovered by most players. Like the Great Hollow and Ash Lake in Dark Souls 1 for instance, just to realize their artistic vision and captivate players with something truly unique. This game is full of this because it plays scene by scene and you're in the next scene the moment you blink. And I mean that literally. This game takes place in the main character's memories, and every time he blinks, it skips to the next memory. The twist is that you play the game by opening your webcam and the game detecting whenever you blink. Combined with the emotive, heartfelt story, it immerses you in this nostalgic and melancholic feeling of trying to hold on to your memories desperately, trying not to blink in each scene so that it won't skip to the next one, so that you can stay there a little longer. It is a trip, and there is a version of the game, or an option in the game, I don't really exactly remember, that you can play without the blinking system. You can just use your mouse, but I think it just takes away from the whole experience that way. If you don't have like a disability or condition that would prevent you from playing the game this intended way, I heavily recommend that you play the game by blinking. And I understand if you get turned off by wacky experimental shit like this. Like, I was very skeptical and unwilling to, you know, play the game in this unconventional weird way, but it's not just for the sake of being a gimmick. The game takes full advantage of making you play by blinking. It really does some cool stuff with it. Trust me when I say it's worth it. And plus the game is only 90 minutes, so you don't have that much time to waste on it. However, do keep in mind that because you'll constantly be trying not to blink, at the end of those 90 minutes, your eyes will be very upset with you. Number 18, Endoparasitic. Just like with BPM, I made a whole video on this game, so go watch that. Again, it will be linked in the description. Moving on to the next game. Number 19, GRIS. You've all probably seen GRIS somewhere. It's the quintessential artsy depression game. It's everyone's favorite punching bag. It's everyone's favorite game to flash clips from whenever they want to, like, for some reason shit on indie games for trying to like be artsy and try to tell their stories through movements and no dialogue with simplistic gameplay. It's a weird phenomenon. Obviously, there are so many fucking indie games out there that are just not remotely like that. Like, I don't know, there are just so many more indie games that are trying to be the next roguelike or Metroidvania that everyone plays instead of something like this. Not that like there's anything wrong with doing either of those. It's just a weird phenomenon that people will immediately shit on something artsy the moment they see it. I don't know. Like the moment a game looks like it's oil painting and instead of like regular dialogue it has like symbolism and choirs in the background, and like that's immediately enough reason for people to not only dismiss the game but like dismiss the whole indie game scene for some reason. I don't know. Like, all I'm trying to get at is I don't understand where the notion that there are so many games like GRIS out there came from, when I bet that in the last 30 minutes 30 fucking games that are trying to be the next Vampire Survivors probably came out on Steam. And apparently that's fine, but having GRIS and fucking Before Your Eyes in the same timeline is too much. That makes every indie game about depression, and they're not about just depression, first of all, and I'm going to come to that, but I'm just so butthurt about this. I'm just so annoyed with this because like even people I respect and follow on the internet do this shit. Like fucking Bricky with his Outer Wilds review at the beginning, he does this same shit, like calling it hippy dippy indie shit that's always about depression, to directly quote the video, and again flashes clips of GRIS like everyone does on the screen. Hell, I don't remember for sure, but even I might have done this in my older reviews, and if so, I'm sorry, because it's fucking stupid to do that. Not only because it's dumb to cherry pick these few games to make your statement shitting on the existence of artsy games about depression for some reason, as if they could be any actual detriment to the games industry at large when we live in the era of fucking scummy battle passes and microtransactions. Fuck off. But also because GRIS isn't even about depression, it's about grief. And yes, it's fully told with allegories and symbolism, since there's only one character and she can talk, which for the record, her being mute isn't even part of the artistic decision, is literally a plot point. And if you can just get your head out of your ass and go into the game with an open mind, trying to appreciate it for what it is, instead of letting the YouTubers you watch form your prejudices for you, I believe you can find an experience here that will move you thanks to its beautiful visuals and swelling emotive soundtracks, all accompanying a captivating story that is actually not that difficult to follow if you go in with the mindset that the game is trying to tell something to you and pay attention, instead of thinking that it is deliberately trying to obscure things from you. So yeah, I ended up using this section to kind of rant about the way people look at games like this, instead of actually talking about the game itself, but I think it was necessary, not only to get it out of my own chest, but to also encourage people to give games like this a shot, instead of just dismissing them as pretentious games that have nothing to say and style over substance, you know. Number 20, Arise: A Simple Story. I only got this game because it was bundled with GRIS for dirt cheap, and there's not too much to say about it. It's a cute, short little atmospheric puzzle and platforming game with a simple and sweet story, as the name suggests. It kind of combines the ideas of GRIS and Before Your Eyes a bit actually, since it's about like grief and reminiscing while you jump through the memories of your life one by one. However, it has neither the uniqueness or emotional punch of Before Your Eyes or the incredible visuals and soundtrack of GRIS. The creative and artistic choices in those two games just allow them to have such powerful storytelling moments that this game doesn't really have. And in terms of atmosphere, it never reaches the same heights either. Whether it's an attempt to give off feelings of nostalgia or melancholy, it's just a fine attempt rather than a slam dunk, you know. But still, with its low price and like 4 hours of playtime, it's still a good wholesome way to relieve some stress and enjoy some good vibes for an afternoon or evening. Number 21, Journey. So can you tell yet that I was on a relaxing, no dialogue, short atmospheric game binge at this point? I don't know what it is about me and just not clicking with people's favorite games, but I remember Journey being huge. And even today I see all kinds of like retrospective type videos on why it was a masterpiece and still holds up and stuff. But I personally don't really see what's quite special about the game. I guess it could be that it was the first of its kind really. I don't really remember any games like Journey before Journey came out, so maybe like it kickstarted a whole genre of game and that's what made it so influential. I'm not sure, but the one thing that really awakened something in me here was coming across other players at random points seamlessly and traveling with them. That was really fun and cute. It filled me up with all these warm, fuzzy feelings. Other than that, I don't know, I guess you're just really supposed to take in the atmosphere, and that's supposed to carry everything because like there's almost nothing else in this game. Like I guess technically there's platforming and stuff, but it's not like it is challenging in any way. It's just there to make traversal a little more interesting, I guess. And in some sections where you have to like activate all the platforms and stuff, I guess you could kind of call them puzzles. I don't know. The game was just really bare bones, is what I'm trying to say, but it works because it doesn't overstay its welcome. A game with such little, unless it does something like really fucking different with the environments constantly, it wouldn't be able to remain fun after like 3-4 hours, I feel like. And it only lasts for like 2 hours, so yeah, I don't know. It was a cute little game to spend time with, but nothing too special in my opinion, honestly. Number 22, Getting Over It. So this is really funny for me to put right after Journey, because like the goal of the two games is exactly the same, but how you get there couldn't be more different, obviously. And like they give off the complete opposite energies, obviously. I'm not even going to like explain the game or talk about like how the game is. You already all know this game. Like it is fucking Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. If you don't know what the game is about, just watch a 10-minute clip and you'll get what it's doing. I mean, there isn't really anything to analyze anyway. What am I going to talk about? The fucking story and soundtrack of Getting Over It, the fucking characters in Getting Over It. Like this game is just doing one thing. We all know what it's doing. We all know what you're supposed to do playing this game. Like the point of the game is the title itself. Did I get over it or did I not get over it? I did not get over it. And it's not because I raged so hard at the game or like it fucking like mentally broke me. I wasn't like fucking screaming and kicking like you see the streamers playing this do. It's just the fact that whenever you fall, you lose so much progress and like the game has no checkpoints, etc. And every time you get over the same obstacles, it's always the same experience. You get a little further this time and then you fall, and then you do the whole thing again and maybe get a little further and you fall again and do the whole thing again. It is kind of mind-numbing. I didn't feel like I was going to get anything out of the game by just constantly, you know, falling and trying again and falling and trying again, except for like being able to say, yes, I did it, I got over it at the end. Like it just, the time I would spend on this game didn't seem worth it. Like I think I made it to the bucket and then I accidentally rode the snake, or like fell down right next to the snake, so it was like just similar to riding the snake anyway. I think something like that happened. That's when I quit, but it wasn't what you would expect. Like I didn't fucking like rage kicking and screaming, you know, just like I said, I never had that type of reaction to the game. I just simply decided that I didn't want to waste any more of my time on trying to finish it and thus calmly walked away. So yeah, it's surely one of the games ever made, I guess. Number 23, Pizza Tower. So we just come out of 2023. You probably like heard everyone talk about this game anyway. It was one of the bigger indie games last year that everyone talked about, and you probably seen some of it even if you have not played some of it, so you probably have a good idea of what to expect and what the game is about. I don't really find much point in reiterating those. I'm just gonna say what everyone else says. The game is fucking amazing. Great music, amazing art style, you know, reminiscent of Saturday morning cartoons. The effects and animations also reflect that. It just perfectly gives off the vibe of, you know, playing a Saturday morning cartoon. literally playing a Saturday morning cartoon, you know? And like even without that, the rest of what's here already makes it a perfect game. Like the fucking mechanics are amazing. This is the first game I've seen where you parry by taunting. You have taunt parries. It has incredible levels, each with its own themes and fun gimmicks. It has amazing boss fights. I especially wouldn't expect the boss fights to slap this hard from a game like this. I really wasn't expecting that. And just, it's all around an amazing full package. Just buy the game and play it. I don't know what else to say. This is a fucking masterpiece of a game. It is so hype, so fun, so charming, amazing. Simply amazing. Number 24, Project Wingman. So before we get to the brief review, let me just address the huge elephant in the room for those of you that have watched Boneless Wingman Part 1. Part 2 is probably never coming out. I'm really sorry about this, but it's just a lot of work, and like I said, I need to cut back on the work that I put into these, and I was just not satisfied with how I wrote and structured part 2, so I was planning to like work on the script again and like change parts so that the jokes are funnier and the exchanges are much more smart and stuff like that, but I just ended up not being able to come up with anything much better before my interest already shifted to other games and projects. Like, this is just the 24th game on this list. We're not even halfway in. I played so many things and my interests have shifted so many times after I played this game that at this point I'm not only not too excited about putting that much work into a video, but I'm just much more interested in talking about other things than Project Wingman. I don't know, like, I don't want to say that it is outright cancelled forever still. Maybe if someday my Project Wingman enthusiasm revitalizes with like a sequel or something like that, I may return to this project and finish part 2, but at the moment you just shouldn't be expecting part 2 anytime soon. So as much as it pains me to say that, let's just move on from that, you know, conclusively. I've already mentioned this so many times during like my update videos and stuff, but still, I felt like it was appropriate to mention the current situation one more time here with that part 2 when we're at Project Wingman. Now let's move on to the actual review, and this is going to be really brief because this game at its core is just Ace Combat 7, and I've already made a full review video on that game. In fact, it is the first review video I've ever made on this channel. As always, the link for that video is going to be in the description. Here, I don't want to like go over the same things I say in that video, so I'm just going to do this based on what the little differences are in between this game and that game, and just go over basically which of those differences are strengths of this game over Ace Combat 7 and which of them are weaknesses. And another funny thing is I've actually already done this, it's just that I did it on Steam. I made it a Steam review of the game comparing it to Ace Combat 7. So I just want to go over that review, and I'm also going to put it on screen for those of you that for some reason are looking at the actual video. Pros over Ace Combat 7. No mandatory tunnel run, thank fuck. Can equip more than one special weapon at once, which is the biggest pro. Much better rival and final mission. Cheaper, and there's Prez. Prez gets her own little bullet points. Cons over Ace Combat 7. Fewer mission types. Pretty much every objective is to just destroy the marked targets with no time limit or other catch. This is the biggest con, in my opinion. It's no secret that I love Ace Combat 7's various different mission types. I think they spice up the gameplay really well. However, I also know that that is really not for some people out there, and I've seen individuals that are much more enthusiastic about about the more simplistic, just shoot down all of the things in the given time limit, or just, do a score attack type of missions like in this game. So yeah, even though it's a con for me, I'm sure that for some people out there, it will be one of the biggest pros of the game. So yeah, if you're one of those people, I can definitely say that this game will probably click much more with you than Ace Combat 7 will. Next con is there are fewer planes and special weapon types overall. Even though you can equip more special weapons, the overall number of them is lower, which is somewhat saddening. Though it is of course understandable since this game has a much smaller budget and was made by a team much smaller than Project Ace's. And finally, weather effects like wind and lightning are absent, or they just don't affect you. Which, the fact that they were there really spiced things up in Ace Combat 7, I feel. So something feels a bit missing here after I play that game with the wind and lightning hazards, stuff like that. The aspects of the game that ties with Ace Combat 7 that are just as good as Ace Combat 7 are story, first of all. Both are just fine. The overall cast of characters, excluding the rivals and prez, which I've already mentioned at the beginning that this game has better rivals and it has prez over Ace Combat 7. The remaining characters overall are just pretty good in both games, I'd say. And then finally, the soundtrack. Both games' soundtracks are fucking incredible, to the point that it's really two of those games that you can say, hey, they made a free game that comes with my music album. Final verdict, buy both. Just buy both games and make your own decision, because you don't really have many other options if you like these types of games anyway. Ace Combat and Project Wingman is basically all that's there. There is also Ubisoft's Hawks, I guess, if you can still buy that anywhere. So I recommend that you cherish these games greatly and be vocal about it too, because they are the only ones we have left, and even that could change any day. So keep making it apparent that there's still demand for these games, that there are still lots of players in the world that are waiting on these games to come out, that there's still a market for them. And you can also be sure that I'll be doing my part as well when the next Ace Combat or Project Wingman game drops. Number 25, Unsighted. So you might have heard about this game or might have not, because it's not really that popular, but it has a very loyal and dedicated fan base that will even give it such high praises as the best 2021 game you haven't played, for instance. And the main reason behind that most of the time is the time mechanic, which works like this. Every character, including your character, has hours to live, and there is a finite resource that you can find which gives 24 more hours, if I remember correctly. It could also be 48, but I think it was 24. Every time you give one of these finite resources to a character, and you can give it to yours as well, it increases the time they have by 24 hours. And from character to character, it changes how much time they have left, but giving them this resource also deepens your relationship with them. So not only do you have this choice of whether or not you want to make the game easier for yourself and give yourself more hours, or if you want to give other characters more hours, you also have the choice between, hey, do you want to deepen your relationship with this character that already has so many hours that you probably don't need to give any of this resource to them, or do you want to keep everyone alive? It's a really interesting mechanic. I think it is implemented fantastically. I think they hit the nail right in the head in both concept and execution. It is very stressful to play with this mechanic, and that is intended, but I think it is stressful for the wrong reasons. What I mean by that is, when you take in all that I've just said and analyze it, you probably think that this game works because its characters are really likable and you want to keep all of them alive. You really care about these characters, but it was more the fact that I wanted to, you know, use these character services because most of them are NPCs that sell stuff and like buy stuff from you, things like that. I also wanted to get a better ending because I thought it could like give me better rewards or achievements or stuff like that. It was basically always for any reason besides me caring about the character as a character, you know, because I don't think the game really does that good of a job with its characters. I don't think they're written badly, I just think they're very underutilized. Like the only instances where you will gain any idea about what your character's relationship with these other characters are, besides when you're, you know, interacting with them inside the main hub area, whether you're buying something from them or giving them meteor dust, which is the resource that I was just talking about that extends their lives. The only instance besides these are a few flashbacks that you see throughout the story, which are not very long flashbacks either. And this just leads to a game that is, instead of being a game about your relationships with these characters that do not have much time and making you deeply regret yourself if you fail to save any of them, it just instead becomes a game where you only see these characters in the hub area and in these very few flashbacks, and the rest of the game, like 90% of it, you're just alone by yourself without any dialogue between you and your friends. And what I'm overall trying to say with all of this is that the game has this amazing mechanic that works super well, but would work even more fantastically if you could care as much as the game wants you to, but I think it just fails at making you care about them that much. Besides that, everything about the game is really well made. It's a really fun game to play. It's one of those top-down, or like isometric, I guess is a better term for it, Metroidvanias, like Hyper Light Drifter, for instance. It plays a lot like that, but there's also like blocking and parrying, which I think were absent from that game. There were more weapons and attacks in that game, I think, but overall that is the closest game I would compare this to. If you played that and enjoyed that, gameplay wise, I think you will really enjoy this game as well. And one last thing that I want to touch on before we move on to the next game is people also compared this game a lot to Zelda, and I don't know how true that is because I haven't played any Zelda game before, but it's really cool to see that because I know how special Zelda games are to a lot of people, and if this game is reminiscent of those games, if this game is reminding them of Zelda, I can tell how much people love this game, and it's really cool to see a game be that special to a lot of people out there. For me, as you can probably tell, it was not that special, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it, and I heavily recommend that you play it too.